We're in trouble. We're in big trouble. But that doesn't mean that we're falling off the cliff. That means that things are going to be different, that we're going to have to live differently, that our plant and animal relatives we're all going to suffer. But it doesn't mean that we are smashing at the bottom of the cliff.
Now, I want to bring us right into the time that we're in here in the beginning of 2026, because here I'm talking about this tremendous sense of loving mutuality. And many of us are deeply concerned that we're either on the precipice of climate catastrophe or we've already gone over the precipice, depending on which climate scientists you talk to. And I wonder how you view this particular time from your vantage point, combining science and indigenous wisdom.
You know, I feel that precipice, and your the way you navigated that of, are we over the precipice? Are we just on the brink of it? Are we approaching it? Are often questions that are asked, but I want to push back on that, because a precipice means you're going to fall off and tumble to the bottom, and that will be the end of things. That's not how nature works. It's all a continuum. Are we past a tipping point with the parts per million in the atmosphere? I don't know. I'm not a climate modeler, but we're darn close, right? We're in trouble. We're in big trouble. But that doesn't mean that we're falling off the cliff. That means that things are going to be different, that we're going to have to live differently, that our plant and animal relatives we're all going to suffer. But it doesn't mean that we are smashing at the bottom of the cliff. And the reason I say this is because we don't give up hope. We don't give up pushing back just because we have crossed a threshold that says, oh, this is bad news. It is bad news, but we can make it less bad news if we continue to strive and push for the climate adaptation strategies. So that's why I want to push back against it, because that can be really defeatist to say, we're over the edge. Well, I think we are always approaching an edge. We're always approaching a cliff, and we need to step back from it and reach out a hand to the one who's dangling below us. And that we still have work to do.
So, what would you say, like if you have a metaphor or description of this time that, oh, here's how I see it, Tami. I mean, forget the precipice thing. Let's leave that alone. Here's how you see how humans have gotten to this point. What's happening now, right now in time? Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many ways to think about this, but one of the ways that I find helpful is, I call it like the age of remembering. I think about Joanna Macy's teachings of the Great Turning. Joanna's words are probably more familiar. So I would say we are in the time of the Great Turning, where we understand that our actions have, in some cases, incrementally and unintentionally, and in other devastating cases, quite intentionally, pushed us to this situation. But that if we value our plant and animal relatives, if we value this beautiful planet that was given to us, we have to do the work. We have to do the work of healing. And so that's the great turning, isn't it? The great turning of turning away from those actions, behaviors, and worldviews that poison the earth, and turning toward regeneration and healing. That's why I call it the great remembering, because as an indigenous woman, I am full of the stories and the knowledge of the way that for most of human histories, people interacted with the living world in a way that was grounded in gratitude and reciprocity. This extractive worldview, which we are living with now, is quite honestly, it it's what, 400 years worth? And you think, well, that's a long time. Not, it's an oblique of time in human history. We are in an era of a profound error, and we are, I think, collectively remembering who we want to be in the world and the world that we want to live in. And so that's the moment that I feel like we are in. We could call it the great turning, the age of remembering that we have to turn away from those things which have brought us to this point, and do the work of healing.
I'm going to share a very brief little story with you, which is I only read Braiding Sweetgrass recently. And I had the book in my hand,
Mm-hmm.
and I read this little section about connecting to a spirit of place and what that is like. And you were talking about someone who was a friend of yours that you were dating at the time. And you said, do you have a sense of a spirit of place? And this person said, well, I love being in my car when there's internet and being able to be on my phone when I'm in my car. And I thought, I can relate to that. I love being in my car. And then you proceeded to talk about how this person and you didn't stay intimately connected for long. And over the course of this person's life, they actually were so depressed that they, and you said it in just a very factual way, killed themselves in their car, their favorite place, their car. And I thought, wow, I love this woman. I love the way she writes. I love the way she just said that right there in a few paragraphs about how far we are away from an age of remembering that our favorite place could be sitting in our car on the internet, on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sharing that with you because it really stuck with me as sort of where we've come to.
Right. And I think it's a very potent story that you're sharing, because it opens this door to saying, well, what if your favorite place is legitimately your car, as you're saying, because I'm comfortable, I'm safe, I have all these conveniences around me. And shouldn't that then fill you with vitality and satisfaction and fullness if this is your favorite place? But that, I think, creates the question of how do our places feed us and care for us? And in that particular example, I think one would argue that there was a deficiency of sense of belonging. Um, of, is that all there is? It's, the ease of my push buttons. Without going into that person's story, that's not the point really. It's that how we think about creating and being in places that that care for us in an expanded sense of self. You know, your comments, push me to think about the way that much of the environment that we designed, as opposed to the environment that was designed by nature, caters to our individual needs. In the case of a car, I can program my seat, my whatever, right? This sort of deadly convenience, because we have this sense of self which is so unitary. It is me, just my body, my mind. That is me. That's what self-interest looks like. And so much of our designed environment is built for that person. But what if your sense of self is a distributed, permeable self that, I am not really me. Um, I'm actually looking at deer out my window right now, we're sharing this same habitat. We're sharing breath. The water that I'm drinking comes from this place. It's not me. I am in relationship to the food that I eat, which is in relationship to the groundwater, which is in relationship to those deer. So I feel like if we can help to cultivate an expanded, permeable sense of self, which really moves into the we, not the I, then we come to cherish places of self interest for a much bigger self.